Hi, it's Summer, and this is my July wrap-up. I read 6 books in July, and the last 3 I read for Summerween, so if you want any more in-depth thoughts on any of those books, you can go and watch that vlog. But I'm just going to talk about them in order that I read them. The first book that I read was A Cuban Girl's Guide to Tea and Tomorrow by Laura Taylor Namey. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. I really liked it. For a couple of years now, I've just kind of avoided YA stuff because I feel like I've just outgrown it. But for some reason, this year I've read a little bit of YA contemporary, and it's been really fun. So the story is about Leela, and there have been a lot of bad things that have been happening to her lately. Her boyfriend broke up with her, she had a falling out with her best friend, and her grandma just passed away. So she's obviously having a hard time and can't really work through her emotions, so her parents decide to send her to England to stay with some family. She's really stressed out because she's supposed to be helping run the family business, which is a bakery. And she's also really close with her family and doesn't really want to leave them behind, but this is going to be a good thing for her. She ends up staying with her aunt and uncle that live in England, and they own a bed and breakfast, I think, or some kind of inn, and she ends up kind of working in their kitchen a little bit and being able to bake a little bit. And there's also a boy from a local tea shop that she kind of starts to get to know. I picked up this book just kind of expecting a fluffy contemporary YA romance, but it had a lot more substance to it, and it was more emotional than I thought it would be. Hearing about Leela's love for her family and for her grandma and how hard that was to have her grandma pass away, it kind of got to me a little bit, and I wasn't really expecting that with this book. The other thing that I really loved about this book were all of the descriptions of food. I, for some reason this summer, have been really in the mood for books about food and baking and stuff, so this was a really fun one because of that. The only reason that I didn't give this a full 5 is because the love interest Orion has a little sister, and her plotline was just kind of dramatic, and I didn't love some of the story that was going along with her. And I think some of it didn't actually even get fully wrapped up, or maybe it was supposed to be left kind of open-ended. But overall, I really enjoyed it, and I actually think about it a lot, and I just have really fond memories of reading it, so I definitely recommend it. Next book that I read was Daughter of the Moon Goddess by Su Lin Tan. I'm trying to remember, I think the audiobook narrator pronounced the main character's name as Xing Yin. Xing Yin is the daughter of the moon goddess, like the title says. One day when she's pretty young, she's abruptly forced to have to leave her home. She's on her own and kind of finds a place to work where she can live and stuff. And one day by chance, she ends up befriending the prince. I've been trying to write short reviews on Goodreads because it's easier for me in wrap-ups if I can just read something that I've already thought up. So I'm just gonna read what I wrote on Goodreads about it. I said, a beautiful fantasy romance inspired by Chinese folklore / mythology. The stakes felt high, and I really cared about what happened to the main character, and I wanted her to succeed. I loved the world building, descriptive writing, and how this book spanned years. I also never thought I would say this, but I enjoyed the love triangle. The only thing keeping this from a 5-star was that I found several things to be predictable, and it took away from some of the big reveals. I really loved the story though, and I'm excited to pick up the sequel. So yeah, those are my thoughts on Daughter of the Moon Goddess. I really liked it, and I recommend it. The next one that I picked up was the first book that I read for Summerween, and that was My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones. I gave this one a 2 out of 5 stars. Also, I don't know if I said with Daughter of the Moon Goddess, I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I kind of maybe think that I could go down to a 4 because some of it just isn't as memorable as I thought it would be. But anyway, I still really liked it, and we're moving on to My Heart is a Chainsaw. I'm also just gonna read my Goodreads review for this one. I said it was so interesting to experience a slasher in book form, and I'll definitely be picking up more in the future, but this book wasn't my favorite. I really didn't like being in the main character's head, and the writing style was a little too all over the place / hard to follow. I found myself getting confused and was unable to keep track of all the characters to the point that when some of them were being killed, I didn't care because I couldn't even remember who they were. The ending pleasantly surprised me though, and went in a direction I wasn't expecting. I also liked how gross and gory some of the descriptions were. Definitely look into trigger warnings if you're planning on picking this one up. And that's pretty much everything I have to say about it. The next book that I read was Shiver by Junji Ito. This is a horror anthology manga. I said some of the creepiest imagery I've ever seen, was literally gagging while reading Greased, paired with interesting, weird, and thought-provoking plotlines. My favorite story was definitely The Long Dream, and I can't wait to pick up more from this author. The first story that I referenced, Greased, was disgusting. It was the most out there kind of concept, I think, too. It was really weird. That imagery will stick with me for a very long time. Ugh, just so gross. And then my favorite story, The Long Dream, I just really enjoyed the plot of that one. And it also had some really creepy pictures in it. It's about this patient at a hospital who dreams really long dreams, and they just are getting longer and longer each night. And the dreams for the people around him in real time are only lasting 1 second, but for him, they feel like they're lasting hundreds of years. But the reason I didn't give this a full 5 is because since this is an anthology, I liked some stories more than others, and because of that, the pacing was just slightly off. But overall, I did really like this. My next book is Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. This book was the easiest 5-star I've given all year. I'm obsessed with this book. It's a new all-time favorite. Like right now, this is my favorite book of the year that I've read. For this one, I said my favorite book of the year so far. I loved every second of this. The structure of this book, being told with alternating chapters from Maggie's perspective and her dad's novel, was so interesting and kept the plot moving. The pacing was 10 out of 10. I loved the atmospheric writing, the scenes that made my palms sweat and my stomach drop, and the perfectly executed twists. So this book is about Maggie, and when she was a little girl, her parents moved her to this house called Banbury Hall. It's a house with kind of dark history, and they were going to fix it up and stuff, but they ended up leaving like 20 days into staying at this house because of how haunted it was. And soon after that experience, her dad wrote a book about it, and that has just kind of like loomed over Maggie her whole life, and she really resents the book. Her dad has just recently passed away, and she finds out that he kept Banbury Hall. She thought that he sold it, but he actually left it to her in his will. So she decides that she's gonna go back there, fix it up, and sell it, but things start happening to her while she's there too. And like I said in the review, this does go back and forth between chapters from her dad's book and her current day, and it was so fun. It was the perfect way for this story to be told. There was a scene in this book right before a huge reveal that creeped me out so bad. Like my stomach actually dropped and my hands were getting sweaty, and I was like panicking a little bit. I was like, what am I reading about right now? This was just a perfect book, and I could not recommend it more. The last book that I read in July was The It Girl by Ruth Ware. I unfortunately gave this one a 2.5 out of 5, and it's even more sad when you take into account that this was my most anticipated book of the year. It kind of sucks, but I'm gonna read you the review for this one too. I said, this book was 200 pages too long and dragged so much. The plot felt very repetitive and had bad pacing, but the ending was full of twists that I didn't see coming, so that saved it a little bit. This book really just felt like it went on for way too long. I feel like the middle part of this book, at least 100 to 200 pages could have been taken out, and it would have made the book a 4-star for me. This book has dual timelines, and it follows Hannah, who in the first timeline, it follows her back in college when she's meeting her roommate and best friend April. And then it also follows her current day when she's married and pregnant, and she's just found out that the person who killed April back when they were in college just died in prison. I just felt like the majority of this book was us getting a tiny little, not very exciting reveal about April, and then Hannah freaking out about it and having anxiety, and then going to her midwife appointment and being told that she had high blood pressure. I'm pretty sure that happened 3 different times in the middle of this book. Like I said though, the ending of this book was good, and it definitely took me by surprise. I was trying really hard to figure out the mystery, and I didn't come anywhere close. So that was really nice to have something surprise me. I honestly don't really know if I would recommend this one. The only reason that I even finished it and didn't DNF it was because I was listening to the audiobook, so it was just easy to keep listening to it. So that's how I would recommend to read it if you're going to. But yeah, sadly 2.5 stars. That was everything that I read in July though. I think it's funny that I read my favorite book of the year so far and my most disappointing book of the year so far in the same month. But let me know in the comments what your favorite book that you read in July was, and I will see you in the next one.